Hello everybody, nice to have you here. Today I want to talk about API testing, API functional testing, web API testing, GraphQL testing, and my first question to all of you will be, are you writing the test for your code? And whatever your answer is, I can be sure that a lot of teams are not doing it. And it's not just because I'm assuming that, I definitely know that because I talk to a lot of teams and a lot of developers. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, so I don't want to talk only from negative point of view here. No, there are like, let's say it's a situation around. And what I want to do today, I want to try to fix the situation. So today we will talk about API testing, and try to split today's video on several blocks. So we will talk today about the problem, why this is happening. I will tell you the solution, or solution which I think definitely will improve situation in my own team. Then we will have a look on the implementation of this solution, and then I want to share the key points out of all these discussions, which you can just take with you, write it down, post it somewhere, and then always come back to them. Or even provide it to your project managers and clients, so they can be more convinced and more easygoing on everything which is related to API test function and financing of those API test writing. So because you still need the time to do it. So let's start from the problem. So as I mentioned before, the problem, as I see it, is that a lot of teams are not writing API test coverage for the code they're developing. And there are reasons for that. I mean, we are talking from Adobe Commerce perspective or from Magento perspective, to write API tests or GraphQL tests is the easiest test you can write there. Maybe only unit tests are easier, and I'm even not sure that's true. Because if you're talking about GraphQL test, it looks like this. So it looks quite easy, right? So you put in the query, you check in the result, and what the problem? Why people are not writing those tests? So there are several points for that. And if summarize it all together, so the first one is setup and configuration overhead. So in any case, to write a test, you need a setup environment to run those tests. So as developer, you would not just write a test and then deploy it and then pray that all your CI/CD processes will be green after that. No. You need to run it, you need to generate the fixtures for those tests, you need to test them appropriately. So you're spending a bunch of time to doing it. So there are a lot of effort, even if it's not so many effort, a lot of developers think there are a lot of effort, and it stops them somehow from writing them. Then it's a lack of test automation experience. So it's coming from the situation that the people are not writing tests, so they're not learning how to write the tests. Means they need to educate themselves, the test suites are changing very often, and then when the next person comes into the project, he needs to maintain the tests that have been written by somebody else, and if he has less experience to doing it, he will struggle with it, and when developers are struggling, they try to avoid the job. And the most important point, that QA has no experience in writing tests, because the test in Magento, Adobe Commerce World, and also in other platforms, if you're using the PHP unit, they're, let's say, PHP based, right? So to write a test, you need to have PHP knowledgeable, and none of our QAs, for example, don't know PHP. They know Python, they know maybe JavaScript, but they don't know PHP. And when our project manager client asking, hey, how are your QA testing? Are they writing the test? We're telling them, no, not really, because it's the responsibility of developer in our team, because only PHP developers can write this code. So the code or the test coverage are going quite low here. So the next point is the changing requirement. So even if you spend the time to write in those tests, you're super happy and proud of yourself, then 1 week later, your requirements for this particular use case started to change. You need to maintain your test again and again. And then again, you come into the situation that you need to spend a bunch of the time to doing it. Yeah, and that's hit the point that I really mentioned a lot of projects that developers first created the test, and then they slowly started to abandon them. So they're not developing anymore, the new tests. So let's say you created a GraphQL endpoint with a bunch of the attributes, and you tested those attributes, looks good, and then when the GraphQL endpoint started to change, slowly new attributes appeared, nobody reflected it in a test, because the original tests are green, because those attributes are there, for example, but the new one is not added. The requirements for the existing one are not added. And yeah, so I would call those tests as abandoned. Then in a lot of teams, the high prioritization of development over testing. And it is like that. So in a scope of budgets especially, so first you're doing the development, and then if you have some time left, you write in the test. That's not very good approach. And even if it's the main approach for the whole teams, those part where you write in the test, it's very often underestimated. Even if you try to include the test in your estimations, when you estimate in the task, it's very often underestimated. And then very often you forgot to include the QA part there, and then come in the project manager, and then requirement changing, which put in the same ticket. That's in very, very most cases lead to the situation that you ended up without the tests. And then we are coming to the next point about resource constraints. So project very often has a limited resources, including the time and the people. And the writing the test is quite low priority for all of them, including the customer. And very often customer just don't want to pay for them because he don't want to understand why does he need to pay 20K of some currency for the tests, because he wanna, like, I need to code now and ready, and I wanna go live tomorrow. And last point I would say, which I totally can understand, is the difficulty of some test scenarios. So if you're talking about the synchronous processing, if you're talking about some multiple system connection together, it's quite hard to write the test for that. In my experience, the most complicated are usually if you integrate an API with payment providers, because to have the payment provider run, and you need some API keys for that, and you need to test against the payment provider system also. So let's talk about solution. And there is a solution for a problem. Don't tell anybody. We found the solution in a tool that everybody from our team is using, and it's a Postman. I hope you heard about this. Everybody of our team using it, even if I didn't ask them to do that. So I assume by this one, so if I look by the general percentage of people I'm talking to, a lot of people are using the Postman, so I hope it's quite common. So with Postman, you creating the API collections, you testing not only your implementation, but you testing the third-party implementation, you testing your customer APIs, you testing APIs. And then I thought, okay, why we are not using Postman to have an auto testing on our projects? And that was quite a good direction to solve our problem, because Postman has a tool which called Newman, and this tool is allow you to run the Postman collection from your command line. And then I thought, why not? I mean, that sounds cool. It's quite easy to integrate it in CI/CD processes, but which benefit it gives to us? So it definitely simplifies the test writing. So you, in any case, creating the Postman collections, the Postman calls, it's very easy to build them because you have an interface for that. So you have a like intuitive, user-friendly interface for creating those interfaces. It's quite easy to do for developers, and also it's super easy to do for QA team. So QA team don't need any language knowledge, they just need to know how to API works and how to create a Postman collection or Postman request and how to test it. So if they have basic JavaScript knowledge, this already will be enough to have a test coverage created in Postman, and you can write a test in Postman itself. Then it's reducing the setup and configuration overhead. So you just creating the collection, you run them against your local environment, you run them against the staging environment, against production environment, and you don't need to configure anything in advance, and you just create several environments, and then when your QA team, for example, tests, and they're telling, oh, okay, I want to test against staging, what this guy deployed on the environment, let's have a look. And then you just hit the run button and it's done. So that's I'm talking about the UI, but the same can be done with command line. you can have the consistent and shareable collection between all your team members, which allow you to maintain the same collection by different people. And every time that somebody is creating some new endpoint or adding some new parameters to GraphQL or REST or even SOAP, then does everybody directly see it and can use it, and then QA also directly see it. So all the same points I mentioned before. Be a bit careful here if you're talking about shared collection. That's a paid plan, so you need to manage it a bit from the financial side. But it's not necessary to be used, so you still can have a collection, then have an export provided to another team member, or have a common repository where you push your every changes and then another team member can always get it from it. So still quite easy to manage. You can easily integrate the Newman with Postman to your CI/CD processes. And Newman is a command line. It's an NPM package which you can install within your CI/CD process and then run your collection file and environment file and then get the results of it. And it's having the same rules and the same processing as the usual Postman test and, let's say, environment variables management. Quite easy. You don't have any extra effort for that. You just have to have a little bit structure to keep your collections and environment clean. But that's not the worst stuff. You can also integrate it in a scheduler mode. So let's say you run the collection on daily basis even. What additionally you can do, you can add clients API there. So you're not only testing your own work, but you're testing also the client APIs. I'll give you a quite good example. We have a client could provide an API endpoints to the system to get a product from it. So we imported the product from the system to our commerce system. And those endpoints are very often changed during our development time. So by creating on the first step the Postman collections, which test in the client API, and creating the test for that, we can always be sure that it's not our fault that import doesn't work anymore, because our test definitely will tell, hey, this field been changed, it's the test are failing now because it worked like several days ago. That's a very good protection for yourself, because you're sure that your API works correctly because you tested it. And then you also can be sure if you, let's say, run your tests every day, so you can be the first one who will react if the system went down or some API not working anymore. Next point, you're reducing the maintenance effort quite tremendously. I can give you the comparison. So in average, when we develop in software, we create in the GraphQL endpoint and then we write in the MP functional test based on the PHP with PHP unit, and approximately every test take 2-3 hours to write. The same for the Postman collection will take you, for one request, even if you add a test coverage in different test cases, will take you about 30 minutes. So you're already much faster. And then, as I told before, that the test been abandoned. So for example, you add in a new parameter which returned with your GraphQL query. Then to add a new test for that, you need 5-10 minutes. If you do the same with the PHP, you don't need 5-10 minutes, trust me, you need more. Yes, to write them maybe you need 5-10 minutes because it's quite easy, but then to run the test, you still need more time to be sure that everything's set up correctly. Don't forget, I'm talking about the teamwork. If you're talking about the individual who have his own environment, nobody touching, he prepared it locally, it definitely will be faster also with PHP auto testing. And then this all leading to the better coverage of all your code with API testing. If I didn't convince you yet, I don't know what else can convince you. Maybe just some examples how it's work in the real world. So let's have a look on them. So the first point, let's have a look on a Postman here. I will not have a detailed guide on how to use Postman. That's not part of this video. If you never saw it, there is a Google and YouTube, they can help you. But here, so let's assume that's your collection. You have some endpoints here. So let's say we have a coverage for the stores, customer, product, and attributes testing on GraphQL layer. We're testing some different endpoints for customer management, let's say the store configuration and so on. And then here on the script section, if you're using still the old version on Postman, it's called test, been updated several weeks ago. And here you can write your test. I mean, it's super easy to do. You have all objects you need. You can have a comparison to different types. You can check if the data are there or not there. You can compare data between each other. You can use just the JavaScript to do whatever you want with it. And even somewhere here, I have a script for creating a customer, for example. And if you go to scripts and then a prescript, which executes before you run the test, let's say, generating the customer email by using just the JavaScript. Yeah. And then when you run it, you have here usually the test result, so you can see that, okay, your test passed, and if it's failed, then you also will see it here. And that's quite easy. And then to run it via the Newman, you just need to, no, not this one. You just need to export it. So you're just doing an export, you get in the collection file, and that's it. So then let's have a look on the Newman itself. So there is a documentation. I'll paste the link then in the description of the video, that you don't need to search much. So that's quite a good demo. Honestly, so this give, I guess, first time how you would run it. But let's have a look. So you just install in the npm package and then you do a Newman run. As easy as that. So I exported the collection file and environment file, because environment files can be different. So we may have stage environment, production environment, dev environment, and then you just run it. I mean, it's Newman run, and it's going through request to request, executing your collection. If you setting up variables during your collection, they will be available on the next request, and so on. So you can test the whole flows, including the checkout flows, payment integration, PSP integration, PIM integrations, and so on. And then you see the running result of it. So you will see how many tests been run and which are failed. So you can come back to them and have a look why they failed and what is wrong. That's quite easy, right? So yeah, and here you can see the folder, how it's look on our environment. We have here the collection file, which you export from the Postman, and everybody can collaborate on it. So the whole your team members, they're doing the merge requests, they add in new tests inside. And then we have a different files per environment. So the CI/CD knows against which environment to run it, because in our case, we're running it against environment after deployment is done. And that's how it looks like. So we have a CI/CD YAML file which run the Newman tests. There is image available. There is an environment being used, so which can be staged in production or whatever else. So you can, if you will have a look here, you can add environment file for any branch you want. It's like if you have multiple environments, it's easy to manage, and then it just do a Newman run, collection, and then environment. It's super easy. And then as a result, you will see something like that. The same as you saw here. So with test run, and then it will show if the test failed or not. And yeah, I definitely will post all those images then in the description. Also, you can have a look on a GitHub repository. Also, we'll add a link there, which maintain all the learning materials or samples of the files there. So, and now let's have a look on the most interesting part of all this video, is the key facts on or the summary of everything which we just talked about. Shall I use Newman? Yes, definitely do it, at least give it a try. It's made my life much easier. I see a lot of benefits in here. If anything changes and I will see that there is a lot of downside, I will make another video on this one. But for now, I see like a lot of benefits from it. Shall I use it for Gitlab and REST and SOAP? Yes, I mean, use it for any endpoints you think are important for your system, and you can test them. So you have a credentials to test them, so on. What else can I test? you can test any APIs, not only your developed, but also which client provides. So if let's say client coming to you with set of APIs you need to implement, I would always take some time for the conception, and during this conception time I would create the Postman collection prototypes, so I'm sure that API works as expected. Can I use the fixtures? That's a very good question. And yes, so you cannot use the standard fixtures of your software, because again, if it's PHP software, there will be PHP based, so that's not something like you can do. So if you're talking about Magento, then fixtures being created during the test run and being removed after, that's not the case here. So you need to orchestrate yourself through this one. So we now test in a very again stage and production environment, so we know which data are there. If let's say we want to be more flexible, then you always can also use standard REST API, for example, for create the product before you run in the test and then delete it after. It's quite easy to do, you can control it, it's fast, and it's, as for me, it's much more understandable how to manage and do it. And then your API is much more stable, because by running those fixtures, you're not only creating the data in your system, you're also testing API of your system. And if you change something that you think will never affect the, let's say, product creation APIs, that's not always the case, and you always then can see if anything broken after your next deployment. Shall I drop the Magento tests? No, I would not recommend this. In any case, I guess if you will be very happy with that, it will be reduced totally, like even maybe to 0. Don't forget there is a lot of default tests already available, and I would then definitely run them, because they're still there, they're still maintained by Magento or Adobe team, or if out of those two systems by the original core developers of the platform you're working with. So definitely makes sense to keep the native tests. In which percentage can I tell you? Only practice can tell you. Can I use the CI/CD process for the merge request validation? Yes, definitely. I don't have yet ready the pipeline for that, I'm working on it, but it's the same as a, let's say, Adobe Commerce GraphQL testing. So you're still rolling out the environment, you still have Magento installed, and then you just not executing PHP unit, run GraphQL test or REST test, you then execute your own tests. So you execute the Newman against your just appeared environment, which is mostly will be the local host. Yeah, that's it. I hope it was interesting. I hope you stay till the end, because the last points are very important. Please don't forget to subscribe and like if you found this video interesting. Even if you didn't find this video interesting, I will be happy to have the comment why and which topics will be interesting for you. I'm quite open for the feedbacks, even if it's negative feedback, because I want to improve all these processes and this flow, and I will be happy to share something which maybe I have a knowledge and you don't have, or I don't have a knowledge and I can learn and then share it with you. Thanks.